So a lot of people have been talking about this being a strange time, and we keep having conversations about how do we communicate through this time. And we're thrilled to be able to have this conversation with you all. Quick introduction. My name is Jonathan Schorr. I'm a founding partner at Be Clear, which is a communications firm that helps folks who are making the world better to cut through the noise and tell their story. I started my career as a public high school teacher and have lived most of my career at the intersection of education and communications. One of the places that brought me was NewSchools Venture Fund, where I ran the summit for 5 years. I am so glad not to have that responsibility right now and to be able to have this conversation with you. Want to let Caroline introduce herself?
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Stevens. Great to be here. Also a founding partner at Be Clear with Jonathan. I got my start on the Obama campaign in 2008, working in communications and press roles in a variety of places during the Obama administration, and then founded the firm about 7 years ago with Jonathan here. So excited to jump in.
So we have a really short time together today. Our goal today is to have you walk out of this room with a framework for making some decisions about how to communicate strategically in the complicated time that we are existing in. Given the short time, we are not going to finish all the conversations that we want to have, but hopefully we can start them. And the way we're going to walk through this is start off, we just want to popcorn around and hear a few people's reasons for what brings you to this room, what's on your mind when you think about communicating in a strange time. We're then going to talk about the importance of having a strong narrative out there as a crucial element of getting you through a moment like this. And then we'll talk about, and I didn't write this down, the part where the shit hits the fan. So Caroline, over to you.
Great, so let's jump in. Who wants to share just a quick sentence or two about why you're here, specifically in this room? What intrigued you about this session? What about your communications or concerns about how you're communicating is top of mind that you want to share today?
Please.
Yeah, jump in.
I did the exercise that I'm sure some of us have done is looked at one of those lists of words. And I literally was like, we might as well just wipe out the entire website.
Yep.
Which is not what we're going to do. We're not going to change our name. But I do believe, especially as those wonderful philanthropic champions who are staying to it, which is not enough of them who are sticking to it, I think there's a way that we can adjust our language to offer coverage, and we've been able to stay under the radar.
Yep.
But I don't think you can count on that. We're
Yep.
small, so I don't have a whole house
Yep.
firm or those kinds of things. And
Yep.
so, if nothing else, I'd like to understand if we get hit, what are the first steps? Because I'm sure there is the first 3 steps that can kill you or make it so that you have the time to get your legs to figure out what is the right approach.
Yep, great. You're in the right place. We've got a lot of content to support that. Anyone else have similar other specific threats in mind? Yeah, jump in.
Hi everybody, I'm Lindsay Cruz, and I think just to build on what you said, I think we found ourselves on the defense so often, and I watched this beautiful video from The Other End of Belonging Institute about how to defeat an oligarch, and it was like, you do not defeat them by finger pointing and wagging and sort of, you defeat them by painting a better picture of a better future, and so I'm just thinking a lot about how we can be on offense and on defense.
I love that. All right, one more if anyone else has more context to share. Great, right there.
My name is Monica. I'm the founder of NewSchools. We do work to support teacher well-being in order to take other. And one of the reasons I'm here is because I've seen 3 panels on leading and communicating during uncertain times, and every panel says some version of either scrub your website and survive or be bold. And as a Black woman in this time, with a daughter, my last daughter, I teeter between which one do I become? I bold, or do I recoil to survive? And every day it becomes different. So I'm looking for some guidance around like tangible steps that I can take, especially because to hide and start my website is to hide my identity. So for many of us, it's not such a simple step. It's just like, yeah, just scrub the language and remove the words from the list. I have to hide my identity and like recoil who I am and who I worked so hard to be both. So I know it's a lot to cover in an hour.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it.
No, that's great. That's all of the insights that each of you shared, I think sets us up really well for some of the conversation we're about to get into. So just to take a step back and set the stage a little bit, I think it's clear probably to all of us in the room that a big piece of the strategy, it's a really clear strategy that this administration is pursuing, is a strategy of overwhelming their opponents, right? So the courts, Congress, Democrats, the media, the general public, right, like us in this room, there's just too much information coming at us that's changing constantly to for us to really be able to process, right? So this is leaving all of us in a confusing, kind of overwhelmed, chaotic state. And that's really something that leads us into, especially nonprofits. And we're seeing a lot specifically in, education nonprofits are becoming the target here. And so I think that's something I'm sure a lot of folks here can relate to. We're already seeing thousands of jobs lost in the nonprofit sector alone. And that's just continuing to build and kind of create this uncertainty in this moment for all of us. So just setting the stage a little bit on where we are in this time and why it makes it so hard to communicate in that moment, right? A lot of what we're already hearing from folks in the room is, I don't know how I should speak up or what I should say or what I should hide and how do I navigate that? And there's just so much to navigate through this moment as as the kind of overwhelming information coming at us is constantly changing. So the good news is there are some principles that can help you guide those decisions as you step into communicating in this moment.
And I think one of the things that you probably know and probably hear in some of the comments even that we've heard already, there's no one size fits all, right? Everybody is going to be in a different situation in terms of who are their audiences, what are the strategic considerations for how much you're going to get out there. What we can give you is a framework for walking through those questions and making those hard decisions, right? After that, it becomes much more of an individual conversation. Everybody's situation is different, but we can give you a framework for it. And the first thing that I want to say is we think very much in this hard moment in a reactive way. There is so much overwhelm. There's so much coming at us, right? And the place to start here is actually much more about what is the story that you are telling now, and are you telling it in a way that will land, right? Are you out there all the time telling a story, telling it in a way that is about human beings and about cares that regular people can understand? Are you defining what's at stake? And the reason that we say this is that if the first time people hear the name of your organization or your name is when you're under attack, you are far less resilient than if there's already a story in their mind that they get and they care about and they understand the values that motivate you in your work, right? Are you explaining it in terms that avoids the jargon? We could go into message testing all day. I think probably people have heard some of that. One of the things that just jumps out at me is literally the words diversity, equity, and inclusion work much better with general audiences than the letters DEI, right? Like it's that level of people needing to understand what we're talking about, right? As opposed to like, it's easy for us in our field to get into the jargon, right? And additionally, being clear who it is that we want to persuade. And in moments like this, I really love to go back to, this is just, to me, such a classic example. This is an ad that ran many years ago as part of the marriage equality fight. And I just want you to notice what this does to think about who it's trying to persuade and speak in language that is persuasive to people who aren't persuaded yet.
Got married September 5th, 1953.
The 59 years basically are the happiest years of my whole life. I fought for the basic freedoms of all people.
If someone had asked me if gay people should get married, I would have said no.
The world is changing. Gay and lesbian people want to get married for the same reason that I wanted to marry my wife. Why shouldn't other people be able to enjoy the happiness and the love that we've enjoyed through our lifetime?
Love is love, and it does belong to everybody.
Let's look at what that looks like a little bit more in our world. So we have had the honor for several years of working with the leadership of the Indianapolis Public Schools. Several years ago, they told their community that they were going to have to make changes and frankly make some sacrifices in order to make the best choices in their district available to all of their kids, something that in 120 years of their history they had not succeeded in doing in Indianapolis. And what they did was they ran a campaign every day for 3 years called Rebuilding Stronger to explain not just the changes that would happen, but how people could be involved and how they could have a voice and what were the values underlying it. And you could see that that really penetrated and landed. They reached a point of resilience that when everybody's worst nightmare happened, okay, a staff member of the Indianapolis Public Schools ended up as a Tucker Carlson star and got on TV and said, this district is lying to you, and this was the whole sort of CRT story, but coming from the inside, from a staff member at the district, right? And what was extraordinary, and some of this has to do with who the audience there was and being clear who their audience was, some of this has to do with their values and their efforts being known and their leader being known. What ended up happening was that this ended up, it didn't matter. And a big part of that was having a narrative. Another big part of that was having a superintendent who was out there every day, visible, known, accessible. When they did some testing around a referendum, Alicia Johnson, superintendent, last bar there, had more warmth from her community than anybody else that they tested, right? It was because she was out there every day telling a story. That doesn't happen by accident. There's a structure to it. And so what Caroline's going to share with you now, when you think about how do we make these hard decisions, is the fundamental structure that underlies strategic decisions.
Exactly. So as Jonathan said, great communications doesn't just happen by accident, right? There is structure and a plan behind all of that. So what we've outlined here is a little bit of a strategic communications overview. You know, it boiled down to about 60 seconds here. So we start always with goals. What's your goal? And so in any situation, not just your kind of organizational goal, but what's the communications goal that you're trying to move in that situation? Really importantly is this far left column when we talk about who you need to reach, that's identifying your audiences. And so as you're thinking about what those goals are and who's you're trying to reach is really kind of a key priority for you to force yourself to lay those out and also prioritize them, right? You can't communicate well to 6 different audiences. You really need to be disciplined about who actually can help influence and get me where I need to go to support that overarching goal. So this chart here, the way it's laid out is, you know, if you had maybe 3 or 4 audiences that you're prioritizing, think about what do they care about. That kind of helps understand, humanize them. Who are these people? How am I going to reach them? What do we want them to do? So in your situation, how do you, what could this audience do to help support you and advance those goals, right? And then to do that, what would you need them to believe about your work, about your value proposition and what you're doing in the world? What would we need them to believe to help support you in advancing these goals? And then this final column on the right is how do we reach them? This is about tactics. This is really starting to get granular around what social media channels is your audience on? What publications are they reading? What are they following your newsletter, right? Like really thinking about what are the channels for you to be prioritizing that outreach. Because again, like we said, we can't do everything well across all those channels. So thinking about how do we narrow that down and prioritize. So we'll keep coming back to this.
And save you taking pictures of this. at the end of this, there's going to be a QR code, and you're going to be able. We'll send you all the entire presentation.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Jonathan. So, as we kind of lay out that overarching structure that we just walked through, which again is a lot to throw at you in a quick synopsis, that I think the main thing to take away is how important it is to clarify those goals and those target audiences, and prioritizing that and getting clarity there will help you think about this question. How do you make a strategic decision about when to engage in a fight, or choosing a fight, or potentially responding to a fight that's coming at you, right? So, we're not necessarily opposed to fights. We actually think strategically, if you're being thoughtful about how you engage in a public fight, it can sometimes be really valuable for your organization. It can bring awareness to your work. It can demonstrate your values. It can elevate what you're doing, right? If it's in front of the right audiences and you feel like you're on the right side. The challenge here is that it is a strategic decision. It's not a one size fits all. And I think for every individual organization, there's a lot of different considerations around how you're going to fare in that fight or in that conversation, and it kind of all goes back to those audiences. So, are your audiences going to be supportive of that fight? Are they going to like seeing you kind of in that conversation? Or are there other considerations, kind of who could influence you? Or could you have funders who are going to cut off funding because they don't like you being in that fight? Or obviously kind of a range of issues and repercussions that we'll continue to walk through. So there's kind of a lot to think about. And again, like we said, it's really not a one size fits all. Every organization has a really different positioning here around what's going to be the right decision for them, and where to step up and where to step back, kind of going back to some of those audiences and who's important to them. So as we try to set the stage, as Jonathan said, for making sure that before you're getting into these fights, before you're moving into that space, either proactively or reactively, do you have kind of the strong foundations of your communications for your organization, right? So here is a little comms health checklist that you can go through and just kind of think about, how are you telling your story right now in a way that feels compelling? Are you telling it regularly? Is it consistent, so it's showing up in a lot of places and it's on your audience's radar? Is it in the places where your key audiences will see it, right? So kind of back to that checklist of, is my audience, are they on Facebook? Then I should be on Facebook. Is my audience reading, specific publications? That's where I want to be. And are you talking in plain language? Back to that notion of jargon, and instead of using phrases that sometimes mean something to folks in the room or in your world, are you speaking in a way that that real people will understand and will connect with the work? I think the last one, telling human stories, is something that we emphasize so much in our work, because that is really where the connection happens, and that is so often where you can move the needle, when you're able to make that connection for folks around how your work or what is what you're doing really matters. And so I think underlying all of this, the most important thing to take away is, when you're telling your story, when you're talking about your work, are you being clear about what's at stake for your organization, for the people that you serve? What would happen if you went away or that work wasn't happening, right? Like, who would be impacted? And making that direct connection will really set the stage for how, just kind of how essential the work that you're doing is. And doing that regularly, as Jonathan said, the more that folks are hearing it before you come into more of a crisis situation, the better foundation you already have.
So that all sounds great. It's always good to have plans. It's always good to have a structure. And then stuff happens. What then? The word crisis at its root means decision. We think of it as a scary, anxious, uncomfortable time, which it can be. But at the end of the day, it is a time when you have a decision to make. Crises tend to be bad for us, but they aren't always. They can be an opportunity where you're going to get a lot of attention and have an opportunity to show your values. But the people who come out okay in crisis moments are the people who make hard, clear decisions at the outset. And so as we think about the kinds of things that can happen in the moment that we're living in, we want to do a quick, what do you do if something happens to you? What do you do if that attack comes? How do you think it through? First question, is it actually a problem, right? Maybe it's something that seems really annoying and people are beating you up on some social media all the time and your audiences don't care at all, right? So it might be noise. It might be a situation where this fight is going to do you good, right? Where you get out there in public and you have a fight that shows your values and it's going to help you. But it might be a real problem. If it's a real problem, these are the fundamental principles. And again, we're going to make this all available for download. Most important step is to manage to a reality-based timeline. Whatever crisis it is moving on its own time. We tend to want to have some time to think things through and consult with people and be collaborative. And sometimes you will have missed the moment. So you start by getting clear on how much time do I have to figure this out? And then the next question, what would it mean to respond to this in keeping with my values? And what action do I need to take? I'm not talking about communications. What action do I need to take to respond to this? And then you can decide what stand you're going to take. And if you move quickly enough and forcefully enough, you are the ones who tell your story. When we talk about action, people always tell the story about Tylenol as the classic, the comms consultants were the heroes in the room. That's not the right story. What happened in 1984 when these Tylenol bottles were poisonous, the reason why you have this safety wrap on medication bottles today, what they did was, the first thing they did was said, we're going to take this product off of every shelf in America, and we're not going to sell it again until we can make sure that every bottle of it is safe. So for a year, they took their most important product off the shelf. But by doing that, and it was only then that they could speak with empathy and in clear terms because they'd taken the action. And they talked in very human terms, but their promise meant something because they'd taken action that was hard for them, but was the right thing to do. In the end, they came to dominate the industry again because they had maintained people's trust by doing a hard thing. So action comes first. But then there's a whole set of steps that you take from the communications perspective once you've figured out what your action plan is. And we're going to walk you through those, and we're going to give you some tools that you can use in your own organization. It starts with making a map of risk and impact, right? So identifying situations, the ones that are going to be at the upper right are both likely, have a decent likelihood of occurring, and they would actually really matter to your organization if they happened. That's how you're going to decide which scenarios you want to focus on. Typically, most organizations will pick 2 or 3 of these that they want to focus on, right? Up there at the upper right of pretty bad, pretty likely, right? Identify some of those scenarios and ask yourself a set of key questions. A, since we're planning ahead, what can I be doing now to reduce the risk of that, right? What is the actual response plan? What actions are we going to take? And then a set of communications questions. Who gets to decide in advance? Who makes decisions? So that you're not figuring that out in the moment. And then you're going to go through this communication, audiences, messages, tactics, tools, timing, and who can have our back, who are the validators, so that we're not speaking alone when this kind of thing happens. And those things will then determine which tools you use to get your message out. This is a partial list of some of the kinds of tools that people will use in any communication situation, but particularly in a crisis, and it's framed as a checklist because you're going to figure out, depending on our audiences and what channels they listen on, who we need to get to, which of these we actually need to use. Oh, about lawyers. A lot of times we find ourselves in tension, we comms people find ourselves in tension with the lawyers. This is a literal thing that a lawyer said to an organization leader. I'm not telling you not to listen to the lawyers. I'm telling you, balance the advice that you're getting from different parties. The legal view is one view, but it's going to tend to force you out of the place that we're trying to encourage you to be in, which is being human. Take it as one data point, take it as one piece of advice, don't take it as decisive. Let's skip this one, because we're running out of time.
Great. So now is the fun part. It's your turn. So we're going to walk through some of the worksheets similar to what Jonathan put up here and kind of just workshop some of this together. So we promised there's a QR code that we'll share that you can download the frameworks here. What I want folks to think about is what's an actual threat to your organization right now? Something you're worried about is happening or could happen, but that feels real, that feels like you would want to have a plan, a communications plan to respond to. And I want to let everyone take a minute to think about that. What we're going to do is walk through just a workshop a little bit of the audience question and kind of how we would approach that for one or two examples as we have time to just show you all a little glimpse into how we would work through this. And then hopefully that gives you the tools to take that back and continue to expand on this with your work and with your organizations. So for folks to take a minute to think about a big example that is something, a threat, something that's real that you're thinking about, that you're concerned about, and what that would look like, kind of like what your response would be, right? And then how we can help you think through the communications planning for that. So let me know if anyone has something that they want to share, that they're comfortable sharing with the group and workshopping live.
And we'll put the QR code up again at the end if anybody missed it.
Yep, definitely can share that out. And the QR code takes you to a series of sheets that we've created, similar to how we started talking about the audiences a few slides ago. Is that's just a really important place to start once we start getting into the communications piece. So, does anyone have an example that they are comfortable sharing that we can use to talk through some of this framework together? I see that you're interested.
What's the bad thing you want to be prepared for?
Yeah, just
All right. Hello, everyone. Lindsay Fuller, Executive Director for Teaching Well. We do educator retention work trying to solve the staffing crisis. In particular, we're focused on educators on the margins that reflect our students. We operate racial healing affinity groups. We have for 4 years. It's backed by a secure funder. We're not changing that. And we feel okay about it because, well, first of all, we rock for it, obviously, but we feel okay about it in particular because we have a white affinity group. So that's often the critique. This January, we launched a queer affinity group for queer, trans, and non-binary educators, K-12, national, virtual. My board was like, really, Lindsay? In January? And I was like, exactly right now. Regardless of how people feel about these beautiful humans, what we know is that they're an attrition risk. We also know that they're filling up our clinical therapy services. We also know that they're having mental health breakdowns on campuses in front of children who are already vulnerable. So I am anticipating that particular group could come under fire, and we're trying to decide as an organization if we offer it again next year. Obviously my team wants to, I want to. And we are getting creative. We have changed all of our invoices to reflect professional development because the participants themselves are scared that they're going to get punished or they're having to pay out of pocket if their district, based on where they live, won't pay for it, right? So we're already making modifications to serve them, but I think this could be something that causes ruffles some feathers.
Yep. Publicly. And talk to us more about what ruffled feathers specifically are you worried about?
I'm not. I have a values-aligned set of funders. So I'm actually not worried about funders pulling out.
Yep.
I think our biggest concern is the safety
of our participants. My second concern is the safety of my teammates who identify as queer and non-binary, respectively, the two that facilitate it. And then I think because we haven't invested in marketing, like our scaling has occurred completely organically. We have no advertisements. I'm worried we haven't told our story broadly enough on the offense for folks to understand that this is mission and brand aligned and that this is a part of the staffing crisis. If our queer, trans, and non-binary educators leave, we will have a whole swath of open seats of dedicated educators that are highly skilled that we want with our children. So I think that's the order of my concerns.
Can I ask just a clarifying question about the last one? And thank you so much for sharing this. Who are you worried won't understand that in that last category?
I think that I'm worried that school leaders, district leaders, like partners, aren't willing to be courageous for their own staff and students, so they may not support them to participate. I don't want to create like a underground railroad affinity group. It's like 6 sessions. I'm like, yo, but it's been transformative for participants, right?
Right.
So I think I'm worried about partners with power, less so funders or donors or.
But partners pulling back or not continuing.
Or punishing. I think that actually that one's cyclical. I think it goes back to the safety of the participants.
Of the safety. Okay, so I feel like safety. Maybe let's dial in there a little bit, and just as we think about kind of an overall like threat, right? So if there was like, what's the safety threat? The safety of participants and of the facilitators. As you think about like that from an organizational perspective, what have you done or would you do in the next cycle of this cohort to address that? Kind of like beyond comms, just like generally, what steps have you taken or would you consider?
We've like secured all of our Zoom work. We have, we actually, that particular service is not on our website. It's the only service that's not on our website because we want participants to know that that was their choice. We asked the participants if they wanted the initiative visibilized and they did not. We changed our operations again to make sure that all of the documentation that their bosses, their employers would receive are in alignment with something that could be compensated, paid for, etc. I'm currently articulating a safety policy because also in November, a white supremacist called my personal cell phone, making a threat against me after I did a podcast episode on my podcast about diversity, equity, inclusion work as well-being work, anti-racism being well-being work and mental health work. So the risk now feels a little different because he got my cell phone number, he mentioned my home address, right? Like, I'm getting a second phone. We've made sure that all of our teammates don't list their phone, they're listing Google phones, right? Like, we're trying to take safety precautions.
There's a lot there.
And we're an identity-forward org, and we're not going to change that.
Yep, I love that. It's really helpful. So let's walk through this chart a little bit. You can see, like, just as we think about how you would frame up each of those audiences that you spoke to. As Jonathan wrote out, funders, it sounds like they're pretty solid. So that's an important audience, but not one that you need to be really concerned about in kind of the day-to-day.
And can I just add, I feel like this is such a great example of thinking along both the operational lines and the communications lines, right? Because some of the decisions you're making around safety, right, are very much operational decisions. They are probably more operational decisions, but communications decisions, but they have to precede the communications plan. The action has to precede the communications plan, right? So I think it's a really, really good example. I think one of the places it might be fruitful for us to spend a minute is on the school district and partners and that piece of the communication especially.
Great. So let's talk about the school districts. What's important? What's important to them? What do you want to make sure you're continuing to to foster in that relationship with them in light of
I mean, we're
the safety?
hemorrhaging educators, so it's pretty shocking to me that we're not seeing like funders start funding mental health educators, funding women, funding us, right, about this work. So I'm like, what I know is true for them is they understand that the pool is dry, it's ashy.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
They don't have
They
don't
need-
have a
yeah.
long list of folks that want to become educators. They don't have principal candidates.
Right.
Every loss that we're having in our schools and our classrooms are exponentially more detrimental every month that passes, because we are not having the next generation of educators super encouraged and feeling safe to come in. So I think there's a threat to their stability, frankly, and their mission. I think that they don't want to lose federal funding, so what we're hearing is they like that we are operationally also producing documentation that they have record and we have on record that wouldn't jeopardize federal funding. So
Interesting.
it feels like we're in
Yep.
partnership to a certain
Yep.
extent around protecting their educators.
Yep.
And I think they want to hear that we are not creating a group that is activating and prepping people to come in and fight. Ours is a healing-focused organization, and to be clear, marginalized people have the right to organize and fight, but I think that's the biggest concern of a lot of our partners around our racial healing
Yeah.
work, are like, are they gonna come back, form a coup, and
Right.
take over? And I'm like, I mean, for the world would be better probably, but here we are.
Yeah.
Those are some of my thinking.
No,
I don't know.
that's helpful, and that I think when you think about, then we get all the way to this, that far column. What do you want them to hear? I think you were starting to get at that. You want them to hear that you are a supportive partner, that you are there, but like with also you have awareness of their concerns in mind, right? So you are not coming to like start like an activist like protest with them, right? Like you're coming as kind of in partnership to support their needs, and kind of helping to support what they need, like a pipeline of educators that they can rely on and that are safe. Great. So as you can see, what Jonathan's doing is kind of like a live version of filling in basically each of these kind of boxes here across our audiences, and a little bit of the exercise here is not to actually like fill this completely out, but to show everyone how we go through this, and how you would continue to think about it. So I think I'd love to spend a little bit more time maybe just on one, maybe on the participants, just what do you want them to hear? Maybe in the message of like, is it around safety? Is it around, we have your back and we'll protect you? Like, let's talk about that a little bit, and then we can move to the next section here. Oh,
Yeah.
That's on my tea, y'all. That's why they had it small. Just in case.
Yeah, just stop, yeah.
Trying to keep it classy. So what do I want participants to hear? What I want participants to hear is that they're worth fighting for.
I love that.
The young people inside of them and that they serve every day are worthy of healing, are worthy of investment, are worthy of professional development, and that we're over allyship. It's time for co-conspiratorship, and as a straight woman ED, it is my responsibility to build spaces and then to put our neck on the line, and I got to do it and risk mitigate as well.
Yep.
But that they deserve a safe space, and that the rest of us are going to form a circle around it the best that we can.
I love that. We have their back. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
The 5-minute warning.
Yeah, okay. Anything else you want to talk through on this, Jonathan? Should we keep moving? So I just really appreciate you sharing this, and I think especially that kind of message you're getting to around safety and we have your back, and this is how we will execute that for our audiences, is really powerful. So let's keep moving through just to kind of, again, show you less about finishing this exercise and the time that we have, but just how you would approach this. So I think, hearing kind of themes around, safety and kind of attacks that you could be getting around, like, you're getting personal calls on your cell phone, right? Like, how are you navigating a lot of that is For example, if you wanted to kind of create a kind of a message for it around this is what we're doing to ensure that safety kind of across our internal team, across our participants, across our facilitators, and even across, for school districts and leaders, that we're creating, the documentation in a safe way that they're not going to be a threat for the federal government, right? So I feel like there's a real thread of safety that you can be thinking about. So one of the things that's really important as when we talk about kind of crisis or just like a response is who needs to know. So if for example, you are going to kind of share unveiling a new plan, you want to share out here are all these new steps that we're taking. Who do you want to make sure knows about that before it happens, before it goes public? And I think the thing that's important that I always like to think about in the validator notifications, who do you want to make sure hears it from you, they don't read it in the newspaper, right? And so not that we need to do this live here for you, but just as a really helpful tool to make sure you've thought through kind of all those different, internal teams, obviously a really important one. Anytime there's a big, kind of public push happening, just to make sure your team's really brought along. Funders to keep them in the loop, right? Obviously, district leaders, school leaders, people who, you want to make sure are kind of really your key audiences. And then, the participants. And so I think you have your audiences, and then it's just thinking about who are those key folks, kind of the leaders of those different audiences that you would want to break out and make sure you're giving the phone call, the email, the heads up, kind of more of a notification tree throughout that.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
One of the things that I feel stumped on, I'm good with the communication cascade. I think the curiosity I have in some of my risk mitigation training, it's cautious what you put in writing. So something I'm toiling with is maybe do I set up an office hours, because I'm very clear it's not my space to enter. It doesn't matter that I'm the executive director. I've never attended in a queer affinity group. That actually would compromise safety. So I'm not going into that space. But do I set up office hours and let folks know if you'd like to hear how we're working to keep you safe? You get direct access to me, and I communicate, because there's a part of me that wants to be here are the steps we're taking. Send it to participants, but in the back of my mind, I'm that gets in the wrong person's hand, that could bring more heat.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yep.
But also, because this is a sacred space, I need to be mindful of entry and access, and not using my positional authority or my risk anxiety to come into their space. It doesn't matter if that's right? So I'm just curious if y'all have advice on how much you put in writing. Is it really I need to go on a socialization tour and set up meetings? I'm going on sabbatical weeks.
Sometimes that's not. Sometimes that is not possible. No, and I think again, it's every situation is unique. I think in this case, we do often say be conscious of what you put in writing. If you don't want it to show up on the front page of a newspaper, then I would think twice about what you put in writing, because it certainly there's always that risk once it's out there. And I think the notion of an office hours and a Zoom kind of availability that's separate from the actual sacred spaces, and that's more about process or more about making you available as a leader. I just love that, because it feels as much as capacity as you have to do something like that, it feels like you're really opening that door in that space, if it, whether it's in person or it's virtual. So it's a great question.
I know I seem very anti-lawyer, but I think there's a comms and a lawyer aspect to your question. Right? What is the thing you wouldn't want to end up on the front page? What's the thing you wouldn't want to have as part of a discovery in court? Are both relevant questions?
That's a good point.
It's a good lawyer conversation.
That's the thing. And then Jonathan, if you want to move down just with the last few minutes, we have the last, just to walk through kind of these last pieces here that we have laid out for folks. Again, this is just the checklist of the tools that we had up on the screen earlier, and then some space for you to add other ones if there's other. Again, this is a partial list of kind of general comms tactics that are really important to think about in a broader kind of public engagement, or if you're you're making an announcement. Not necessarily to say that all of these need to be checked every time. So I think it's really important to, in your unique situation, think about what's the right lever. Again, it goes back to where are my audiences? What's going to be important for them? and where will they be showing up, and then that's how you can kind of map against those. And then the final thing at the bottom here is just the kind of decision matrix, and again, it's just making sure internally that you're organized around who needs to kind of be in the know, who's making the final decisions, really just helping you to do some of that planning and prep work, because as we know, sometimes these things move really quickly. And so once you're kind of in a moment and you're responding, you're just trying to get through it and navigate. And if you're able to take a beat either kind of at the outset or even just, a big picture as an organization, who are kind of the decision makers and who needs to be in the loop on some of these pieces, it's just a helpful kind of health checkup for kind of outreach and comms. So that's the kind of toolkit that we've created for you all. Again, Jonathan will put the QR code back up where you can access this, and there's kind of instructions right to the side there that will remind you and refresh kind of what each piece is about. And you can just make a copy and kind of play around in those documents yourself specifically, and kind of work through some of those things with your organization, and hopefully kind of gives you some framework to guide these hard decisions.
And that'll take you to our website. So if you have more questions, shoot us an email. We're getting the hook, so we're going to get out of here. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
speak with
Really
you today.
appreciate it. Thank you.